Hello, my name is Alar Martinez, and I will start the video by answering the question, what is an Asian Pacific American? In simple terms, it is an individual who has origins from South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia. In class, we mainly discussed the Philippines, Vietnam, Korea, China, and India, and then the Pacific Islands from Hawaii, Guam to Fiji, and all the others. So anyone who has ancestry, bloodline, connections, cultural ties to those lands who now resides in America and or one of its territories is Asian Pacific American. Even people who only share half of the blood or a quarter of the blood are Asian Pacific Americans. For example, Hapas, who are of Native Hawaiian descent, but also half European, are considered Asian Americans, even though in certain cultures of their own, they are not seen as Asian because they appear to be more white than Asian, so then therefore face less discrimination than full-blood Asians do. Regardless of that little detail that we did discuss in class, they are still considered Asian Pacific Americans because they're still Asian. They have the same culture, traditions as the Asian community. But the main idea that I believe was discussed in class, at least what I got out of it, is that Asian Pacific American is someone who is part of a community who is forgotten. So the main thing is from the textbook we did discuss how there's this article called The Inadequacy of the Term Asian American, which basically highlights that we have the term Asian American, but its issue is that it just jumbles up all the different cultures together, the ones previously stated, as one, and then doesn't highlight its differences in tradition, cultures, values, or anything. And we all sort of think that an Asian person automatically is either like Japanese, Korean, Chinese, those being the main ones I believe in our society that we recognize, and won't think that they could be Taiwanese or from Cambodia or anything because we only highlight certain cultural groups. And then with that highlighting of certain cultural groups comes the Asian minority myth, where Asians are placed higher in the minority rank compared to African Americans or Mexicans because they are seen as better than, being wealthier, smarter, and or subservient to the American society, white society, basically, and are placed on a certain pedestal. But then with this pedestal, we end up forgetting about all the other races who didn't have as much help when coming to this country and or in general, because before we only allowed certain people to come in, mainly the highest educated or the ones that had the best jobs to come in, granting them more opportunity to rise to success. So then with this, we end up forgetting about all the other cultures who didn't have the same advantages before and then ignored them. In class, we discussed how our school doesn't have a Asian Pacific American Center, and that is because we ignore them. We think that they don't need it. You shared how one of your colleagues said that they wish they had your class because it was all Asians. They assumed that they would be educated, driven, and listen to you. That itself is ignorance and essentially ignoring the Asian Pacific American community because they aren't recognizing how that isn't everyone. Not everyone fits a certain category. Some people do struggle, some people still need help, and regardless of certain groups being wealthy or being highly educated, they still need assistance, but we sadly do not recognize that. Along with this is one of the pivotal events that happened or that we discussed in class, being any of the wars from war in Vietnam, Korea, Cambodia, or the women of Laos. America has either caused and or funded mass destruction of these lands and of these people, killing hundreds of thousands, probably millions of individuals. But yet we never discuss it. In our history books or classes, probably a paragraph or even a sentence will be covered about these events out of the whole chapter or textbook. We love to ignore the fact that we have caused mass destruction and are one of the main reasons why people had to relocate from their lands and move to different countries, either our own and or like South America, for example. So the idea of Asian Pacific Americans being forgotten is a very high standard one, I would say. Following that is how as American, we do love to forget how our racism and discrimination towards them as well, being from the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which was the first exclusion by race that the American government ever did for about 10 years, not allowing a majority of Asians to come to America anymore. And then we also love to ignore the fact that we had concentration camps during World War II for Japanese Americans, and I highlight the American part because regardless of their status of either being immigrants that year or second born generation or being here for multiple generations, it did not matter during this time. Just because they did not appear to be American, white, they were locked up and taken from their homes and deprived of everything that they had worked for. So we do love to forget that as well. But then following that, another major thing that we did discuss in class would be the LA riots from the 1990s, and then with that also how we as a society tend to ignore the Asian American community and let them be to themselves, or we group them together as just being their own. So Chinatown, Filipino town, Koreatown, we always just group them together and then call them Chinese, Korean, Japanese, but then never highlight that they are also American in that aspect. So during the LA riots, no police task force really went to go help the Koreans and or African Americans to stop what was happening, the fear that was happening within that community, because we felt that they are their own little culture and world within themselves. But then again, we always tend to ignore that, of how they do need help and how they are American and how they should be treated as everyone else. But again, with that, they aren't treated as everyone else. They're seen as their own little group. So from my oral history interview, we did discuss the minority myth of how my interviewee did face discrimination and stereotypes from that, because a lot of people would say that he was rich and or very good at math because he was Asian, and a lot of the times they just said he was either Chinese or Japanese, one of the main groups of Asians that I believe our culture identifies, instead of Taiwanese or even Mongolian. People never think about those aspects of what someone could be and always just drift to the main ones that they know. But then also an example would be myself. Previously, before this course, I did have a lot of interaction with Asian Americans. However, a lot of them did sort of fit the minority myth and stereotypes of being highly educated, wealthy. A lot of the Asians at my school were in the math club, science academy. They were highly driven. The ones I did know were more assimilated with white culture, American culture, if you could say. So I did believe that they were at a higher standard and had it easier than other races, such as African Americans or Mexicans. But through this course, I learned that I was wrong. That there are many other ethnicities in the Asian American title that aren't as high achieving, that aren't as wealthy, that are on the poverty lines. But the thing is, we never discuss that as a culture. We always forget that they are American and then always group them as their race being Japanese, Indian, or whatnot. So also with the term Asian Pacific American, we only address the highest ones or most common ones that we see, be it Indian, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, those ones being the main ones that we actually address. And then a lot of times people don't even acknowledge the histories behind everything. This furthering the idea that an Asian Pacific American are the forgotten people or forgotten person whose history is forgotten and or jumbled up and mixed with others who had just become a stereotype of being smart, wealthy, subservient, not good with emotions. We never recognize the history of their cultures, traditions, be it from the land that either they came from or the ancestors came from, or who they are here in America. We always still address them as being Asian and never as American, because physically they might not appear to be. So then we always ask, oh, where do you come from? Are you Japanese, Korean, Mongolian, Hawaiian? We never just go with the flow of them being American. We always have to specify which one they're from, but then when doing so, we always ignore all the smaller territories where they could be from. But in all, I believe one of the main ideas I did get from the class is that an Asian Pacific American is someone whose culture, history, identity, in some aspect or form, has been forgotten and or overlooked by our culture today, and who continues to be forgotten, but someone who tries to fight and stand out and assert themselves as an American rather than someone being from a different territory, trying to have themselves be acknowledged as an American. And yeah, thank you.